History loves a good cover-up. We've got Watergate. We've got Iran-Contra. We've got whatever the hell happened at Roswell. But the greatest, most audacious, and downright ballsy cover-up in American political history didn't involve wiretaps or aliens. It involved a devoted wife, a locked bedroom door, and a level of gaslighting so spectacular it would make a modern-day reality TV star weep with envy. Welcome to Audacious History. I'm your host, and today we are talking about the United States' first, and so far only, female president. Oh, you thought you knew your presidential trivia? Think again. She wasn't elected. She wasn't on any ballot. She didn't even have the right to vote for most of her life. But for 17 mind-bending, chaotic months, Edith Bowling Galt Wilson, the First Lady of the United States, looked at a crippling constitutional crisis, grabbed the executive branch by the balls, and said, "Don't worry, boys, I've got this." This is the story of how one woman hijacked the Oval Office, forged the president's signature, completely sidelined the United States Congress, and successfully convinced the entire goddamn world that the leader of the free world just had a mild case of nervous exhaustion. Grab a drink, because this shit is wild. To understand how Edith pulled off the ultimate political heist, you have to understand who she was before the White House. Edith wasn't some shrinking violet, bred to stand behind a man and smile vacantly. No, Edith was a boss. Born in Virginia, she proudly claimed direct descent from Pocahontas, a fact that she loved to casually drop at dinner parties to establish dominance. After her first husband, a wealthy jeweler named Norman Galt, unexpectedly dropped dead, Edith didn't just inherit his money, she took over his business. In an era where women were supposed to be quietly mourning in the parlor, Edith was running a highly successful luxury retail empire in the heart of Washington, D.C. She was notoriously independent. She was the first woman in Washington, D.C. to get a driver's license and drove herself around town in a sleek, battery-powered electric car, completely unchaperoned. She was wealthy, she was fierce, and she did not give a single solitary fuck about the societal expectations of Edwardian America. Enter President Woodrow Wilson. It's 1915. Woodrow is the 28th President of the United States, and he is deeply clinically depressed. His first wife, Ellen, had just died of Bright's disease. The man was a walking ghost, wandering the halls of the White House, weeping uncontrollably. His inner circle was terrified that he was going to resign or just completely lose his mind. But then, a mutual friend introduced Woodrow to the fabulous Widow Galt. To say Woodrow fell hard is the understatement of the century. The rigid, academic, notoriously stiff president turned into a hopelessly thirsty teenager. He was sending her incredibly passionate, obsessive letters, sometimes twice a day. He proposed to her after knowing her for only 2 months. His political advisors were losing their goddamn minds. "Mr. President," they pleaded, "you cannot marry a widow while you are still supposed to be in official mourning. The optics are terrible. It's political suicide." Woodrow basically told his advisors to choke on it. He married Edith in December 1915. From day one, Edith wasn't just a first lady. She was Woodrow's closest confidant. During World War I, she was literally sitting in the Oval Office deciphering top-secret coded messages while the president worked. She was fiercely protective of him, and she hated anyone who caused him stress. Keep that in mind, it's going to be very important later. Flash forward to the summer of 1919. World War I is over, and Woodrow Wilson has just returned from the grueling Paris Peace Conference. He has one massive, consuming obsession: the League of Nations. He believes with every fiber of his being that the United States must join this new international body to prevent another global war. There's just one problem. The Republican-controlled Senate, led by Wilson's arch-nemesis, Senator Henry Cabot Lodge, absolutely hates the idea. They refuse to ratify the treaty. Woodrow decides that if the Senate won't listen, he'll take his case directly to the American people. Against the desperate advice of his doctors and Edith, the 62-year-old president embarks on a brutal 8,000-mile, 29-city cross-country train tour in the sweltering heat of late summer. It was a suicide mission. Woodrow was already suffering from untreated hypertension. His blood pressure was routinely hovering around numbers that would make a modern cardiologist hit the panic button and summon a crash cart. As the train chugged across the West, Woodrow started experiencing blinding headaches. He had double vision. He was having minor, localized strokes that he just ignored. On September 25, 1919, in Pueblo, Colorado, Woodrow's body finally said, "I'm done." He collapsed after a speech, complaining that half his face felt numb. Edith, taking one look at her husband's gray, drooping face, pulled the plug. She ordered the train to race directly back to Washington, D.C., shades drawn, making no stops. Back at the White House, Woodrow seemed to be resting, but on the morning of October 2nd, Edith went into his bedroom to check on him. She found the President of the United States unconscious on the bathroom floor, bleeding from a cut on his head. Woodrow Wilson had suffered a massive, catastrophic stroke. The left side of his body was completely paralyzed. He was blind in his left eye. His speech was slurred to the point of being incomprehensible. For the first few days, he was hovering on the very brink of death. Dr. Cary Grayson, the president's fiercely loyal personal physician, emerged from the bedroom, looked at Edith, and gave her the grim news. The president's mind was intact, but his body was utterly broken. The stress of the presidency would literally kill him. And right here is where the history of the United States takes a sharp, unprecedented turn into absolute madness. Hey, if you're enjoying watching a constitutional crisis unfold in real time, hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel. Now back to the story. So the president is a bedridden invalid. What happens next? Well, if this happened today, the 25th Amendment would immediately kick in. The cabinet would vote, declare the president incapacitated, and the vice president would take over. Bing, bang, boom. Continuity of government. But in 1919, the 25th Amendment didn't exist. The Constitution vaguely stated that in the case of the president's inability to discharge the powers and duties of the said office, the duties devolved to the vice president. But it didn't define inability, and it didn't say who had the authority to pull the trigger. To make matters worse, the vice president was a guy named Thomas R. Marshall. Marshall was a genial, harmless man from Indiana whose primary contribution to American history was the quote, "What this country needs is a really good 5-cent cigar." Woodrow Wilson fundamentally despised him and kept him entirely out of the loop on everything. Dr. Grayson told Edith, "If we force him to resign, it will break his heart and he will die." Edith faced a choice. She could put the country first, admit her husband was a vegetable, and hand power over to a man Woodrow hated, securing the stability of the American government. Or she could prioritize her husband's fragile ego, lie to the entire world, and run the country herself. Guess which one she picked? Edith and Dr. Grayson formed an impenetrable wall around the president's bedroom. They instituted what Edith would later delicately call her stewardship. But let's call it what it was, a shadow dictatorship. Here is how the United States government functioned from October 1919 to March 1921. If you were a cabinet secretary, a senator, or a foreign ambassador, and you needed to talk to the president, you couldn't. Period. You had to write a letter or submit a memo. That memo went to the White House usher, who gave it to Edith. Edith would then sit in the adjoining room and read every single piece of paper directed to the Oval Office. She decided what was important enough to bring into Woodrow's bedroom. If she thought a document would upset him, she just threw it away or buried it in a drawer. State papers would come back out of the bedroom with cryptic, almost illegible notes scribbled in the margins. Signatures on vital documents looked incredibly suspect. Historians have debated for a century whether Edith physically held his hand to forge his signature or if she just learned to forge it herself. Either way, the president was miraculously approving legislation, vetoing bills, and issuing executive orders, all while barely being able to hold a spoon. And the gaslighting? It was Olympic level. Edith and Dr. Grayson fed the press absolute horseshit on a daily basis. They issued medical bulletins claiming the president was suffering from nervous exhaustion, a depleted system, and indigestion. They claimed he was working from bed and was fully sharp. Meanwhile, behind closed doors, Edith was brutally purging anyone who threatened the illusion. Secretary of State Robert Lansing realized the country was paralyzed. The economy was transitioning from wartime, there were massive labor strikes, and the government was frozen. So Lansing quietly convened a few cabinet meetings just to keep the lights on. When Edith found out, she went absolutely ballistic. She viewed this as an act of treason against her husband. She manipulated Woodrow into demanding Lansing's immediate resignation. The Secretary of State was fired for doing his goddamn job just because the secret Madam President felt threatened. It was a reign of terror wrapped in a blanket of plausible deniability. But you can only lie to the United States Senate for so long before they come knocking. And I mean that literally. By December 1919, Washington was buzzing with wild rumors. Some said the president was dead and Edith was hiding the corpse. Some said he was raving mad, chained to the bedpost and babbling in tongues. The Republican Senate had had enough. They needed proof of life. They needed proof of mind. Enter Senator Albert B. Fall. If that name rings a bell, it's because he would later become the mastermind behind the infamous Teapot Dome scandal and go to prison. Fall was a ruthless partisan brawler who absolutely loathed Woodrow Wilson. The Senate dispatched Fall, along with a token Democrat, Senator Gilbert Hitchcock, to go to the White House under the guise of discussing the Mexican border crisis. Their real mission? To determine if the President of the United States was brain dead. The press dubbed them the Smelling Committee because they were there to sniff out the bullshit. Edith got word that the Smelling Committee was coming. She knew this was a make-or-break moment. If Senator Fall saw Woodrow in his true state, he would immediately invoke the Constitution, strip Woodrow of power, and Edith's reign would be over. She had 24 hours to turn a paralyzed, half-blind invalid into a commanding head of state. Edith orchestrated a piece of theatrical stagecraft so brilliant, it deserves a posthumous Oscar. Here was the setup. Step 1. The lighting. Edith knew Woodrow looked like a corpse in daylight, so she drew all the heavy velvet curtains in the bedroom, plunging it into near total darkness. The only light was a single, carefully angled, dim lamp placed far away from the bed. Step 2. The paralyzed side. Woodrow's left side was entirely useless. So Edith positioned him in the bed so his right side was facing the door. She then took his dead left arm, tucked it completely out of sight beneath the sheets, and pulled the heavy blankets up to his chin to hide his withered frame. Step 3. The decoy. She left his functioning right arm exposed outside the blanket so he could move it and appear dynamic. Step 4. The script. Edith and Dr. Grayson drilled Woodrow on exactly what he needed to say. Keep it brief, keep it sharp. Do not attempt long sentences because the slurring would give it away. December 5th, 1919. Senators Fall and Hitchcock are escorted into the gloomy, suffocatingly dark bedroom. Edith stands next to the bed, a clipboard in hand, looking like a terrifying sentinel. Dr. Grayson stands in the corner, arms crossed. The air is thick with tension. You could cut the paranoia with a knife. Senator Fall steps forward. He peers into the gloom, trying to get a good look at the president's face, but the shadows hide the facial paralysis. Fall, dripping with fake, syrupy sympathy, leans over the bed. He grabs Woodrow's functioning right hand. Fall looks down at the president and says, in a patronizing, theatrical voice, "Well, Mr. President, we have all been praying for you." The room goes dead silent. Edith holds her breath. If Woodrow mumbles, if he drools, if he loses his train of thought, it's all over. Woodrow looks up at his worst political enemy. He musters every single ounce of energy, focus, and hatred he has left in his damaged brain. He grips Fall's hand back with his good arm and with surprising clarity croaks out, "Which way, Senator?" Holy shit. Which way are you praying? Meaning, are you praying for me to live or are you praying for me to die, you opportunistic prick? Senator Fall is completely taken aback. He stammers. The president just insulted him with perfect comedic timing. This is not the behavior of a brain-dead man. Edith immediately steps in, flawlessly executing the next phase of the plan. She hands Woodrow a pre-prepared memo about the Mexican border crisis. Woodrow, using his good right hand, grasps the paper, scans it, and starts making coherent, albeit brief, comments about the diplomatic situation, exactly as Edith had drilled him to do for the last 12 hours. Senator Fall is defeated. He can't see the paralyzed arm. He can't see the drooping face in the dark. The president just delivered a witty comeback and discussed foreign policy. Fall has absolutely no grounds to declare the president incapacitated. The smelling committee is forced to retreat. They walk out to the press corps waiting on the White House lawn, and a deeply frustrated Senator Fall has to admit through gritted teeth that the president's mind is perfectly clear. Edith Wilson, standing behind the heavy curtains of the second-floor window, watches them leave. She has won. The ultimate bluff has held. The secret presidency is secure. Edith had successfully protected her husband's pride and his office, but her victory came at an absolutely catastrophic cost to the United States and the world. You see, running a country isn't just about hiding a sick man from his enemies. It's about actually governing. And Woodrow Wilson was entirely incapable of governing. The biggest casualty of Edith's shadow presidency was the very thing Woodrow cared about the most: the League of Nations. To get the League of Nations treaty ratified, the administration desperately needed to negotiate and compromise with the moderate Republicans in the Senate. But Woodrow, locked in his bedroom, isolated from reality, and suffering from the stubbornness and emotional volatility that often accompanies severe brain trauma, refused to compromise on a single word of the treaty. And Edith? Edith refused to let anyone in to talk sense into him. Cabinet members begged her to let them explain the political reality to the president. She shut the door in their faces. She prioritized his temporary peace of mind over his lifelong political legacy. Because of this total executive paralysis, the treaty failed. The United States never joined the League of Nations. The organization was crippled from the start, a factor that historians agree directly contributed to the geopolitical instability that eventually led to World War II. The Wilson administration hobbled to the finish line in March 1921. Woodrow survived his term, leaving the White House a broken, defeated man, succeeded by Warren G. Harding. Woodrow died 3 years later in 1924. Edith, however, lived a long, comfortable life. She survived until 1961, passing away at the age of 89. To her dying day, Edith vehemently denied that she was ever the acting president. In her heavily sanitized autobiography, she insisted, "I never made a single decision regarding the disposition of public affairs." Yeah, okay, Edith. She claims she merely decided what was important and what wasn't. But anyone who has ever worked in politics, business, or media knows the absolute truth. The person who controls the flow of information is the person making the decisions. By deciding what the president saw, what he read, and who he spoke to, Edith Wilson wasn't just his nurse. She was the gatekeeper to the free world. She was the chief of staff, the vice president, and the commander-in-chief, all rolled into one impeccably dressed, terrifyingly devoted package. History judges Edith Wilson harshly, and frankly, she deserves it. She orchestrated a massive deception, usurped democratic power without a single vote, and allowed the country to drift aimlessly during a critical period of post-war recovery. It was a massive, unprecedented clusterfuck. But from an entirely objective, amoral standpoint, you have to respect the sheer, unadulterated audacity of the grift. In a time before women could even legally cast a ballot nationwide, Edith Bowling Galt Wilson looked at the most powerful office on the face of the earth, locked the door, pocketed the key, and ran the whole damn show. Thanks for watching Audacious History. If you want to dive deeper into the insane medical cover-ups of American presidents, because trust me, JFK and FDR have some wild medical files too, let me know in the comments below. Keep questioning the official narrative, keep reading the fine print, and I'll see you all next time.